The groom slapped the black bride in front of everyone, but he had no idea what would happen next. Subscribe right where you're watching from and share this video. Ava Harris had spent the past 10 years building a name for herself in Los Angeles. As one of the most sought-after plastic surgeons in Beverly Hills, she had sculpted the faces of Oscar winners, tech billionaires, and political figures alike. Her clinic, an oasis of discretion and prestige, was known for its exclusivity. Appointments were booked months in advance, and her clientele valued her not just for her surgical skill, but for her unwavering professionalism. She had grown accustomed to moving in elite circles, where power was measured in box office numbers, Oscar wins, and who got the best table at Chateau Marmont. But no matter how much she accomplished, there was always an unspoken reminder that she was an outsider. She had worked twice as hard to get where she was, and yet, even among the city's liberal elite, there was a lingering sense of tokenism, of being seen as an exception rather than the rule. And then she met William Montgomery. It had been at a gala for the Hollywood Diversity Initiative, a fundraiser that, ironically, was attended by the same people who resisted true change in the industry. He had approached her near the silent auction, oozing confidence, his charm almost effortless. William was the youngest son of Gregory Montgomery, the legendary film producer whose name was synonymous with some of Hollywood's most successful and controversial films. His father had built an empire producing movies that claimed to tell authentic black stories, though they were often filtered through a white savior lens. The Montgomery family had power, influence, and an undeniable hold over the industry. William was different, or so she had thought. He was well-educated, sophisticated, and articulate about the need for diversity in Hollywood. He spoke about wanting to reshape the industry to move away from the stereotypes that had long defined black representation in film. He had a way of making her feel seen, as though he truly understood the barriers she had overcome. Within months, their whirlwind romance became the talk of the town. It was a relationship that should have raised red flags. Their first public appearance as a couple was met with mixed reactions. On the surface, Hollywood celebrated them, a powerful, interracial couple, the embodiment of progress. But underneath the glossy headlines and carefully curated Instagram posts, she noticed the subtle microaggressions. People would refer to her as stunning, but in a way that felt more like an acknowledgement of surprise than a compliment. At industry events, she was often introduced as William's fiancée first, her own accolades treated as an afterthought. The Montgomerys, of course, had their own agenda. At first, she had believed they were genuinely welcoming her into the family. Gregory, though intimidating, had been cordial, always quick to make jokes about how lucky his son was. His wife, Catherine, played the role of the refined socialite with ease, extending invitations to charity luncheons and offering to help plan the wedding. It wasn't until she spent more time with them that she realized she was more of a symbol than a person. They paraded her as proof of their progressiveness, as if her presence alone absolved them of criticism. She was invited to exclusive industry gatherings, always seated next to studio heads who wanted to be seen engaging in discussions about race and inclusion. They would lean in conspiratorially and say things like, "Hollywood needs more voices like yours," while simultaneously cutting funding for black-led projects. It became clear that, to them, she was an asset, a means to an end. The engagement only amplified this dynamic. The official announcement was a spectacle. Glossy, perfectly curated photos were released to major outlets, showing the two of them on a private estate in Napa Valley, bathed in golden light, looking effortlessly glamorous. The headlines all carried a similar tone. Hollywood royalty meets brilliance. William Montgomery to wed powerhouse black surgeon. The marriage that will change Hollywood forever. But what stood out the most was how the narrative was shaped. The articles weren't about her, they were about what she represented. The coverage focused less on her career, her achievements, or even their love story, and more on what their marriage meant for Hollywood's image. The Montgomerys had managed to turn their son's relationship into a PR campaign, proof that they were at the forefront of diversity and inclusion. She told herself it didn't matter. She loved William. He was different from his family. He had reassured her that he wanted to build something new, something real. So, when he proposed in front of a star-studded crowd at the annual Producers Guild dinner, she had said yes. The engagement ring, a breathtaking custom design from Cartier, sparkled under the flashing cameras. The crowd erupted in applause, and in that moment, she had pushed aside the creeping doubts in her mind. But deep down, she knew. She had seen the way Gregory Montgomery had exchanged a knowing glance with one of the studio executives, as if sealing a deal. She had heard Catherine Montgomery telling a reporter how thrilled they were to have a strong, intelligent black woman joining their family, as though she was a carefully selected acquisition. Yet she convinced herself that love would be enough. As the wedding day approached, the pressure mounted. The Montgomerys took over nearly every aspect of the planning, ensuring it would be the event of the year. Every detail was curated to perfection. The venue, the guest list, even the music. But the more control they exerted, the more she felt herself slipping away. William started changing, too. The charming, progressive man she had fallen in love with became increasingly temperamental. He was more irritable, dismissive. He would snap at her in private, only to flash his signature smile in public. When she tried to discuss her concerns about how his family was using their wedding as a PR stunt, he brushed it off, telling her she was overthinking things. The first time he grabbed her wrist too hard during an argument, she had frozen. He had immediately apologized, insisting that he was just stressed. She had wanted to believe him. And now, on the eve of their wedding, standing in front of the grand mirror in her suite at the Four Seasons, she felt something she hadn't expected. Fear. Not fear of commitment, or of the spotlight that awaited her, but fear of the man she was about to marry. The knock on the door startled her. Harper Matthews, her best friend, burst in, kicking off her designer heels with a frustrated sigh. "Traffic was insane," she said, flopping onto the velvet chaise lounge. But then she noticed the tension in Ava's posture, the tight grip she had on the delicate lace sleeve of her wedding dress. "Ava." Her voice softened. "Are you sure about this?" Ava opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, there was another knock. This time it was Catherine. "Darling," she said with her usual poised smile, stepping inside. "It's time to go over the final details. The lawyers need you to sign a few last-minute adjustments to the prenup." Ava felt a chill run down her spine. She had ignored the warning signs for too long, and tomorrow, in front of hundreds of Hollywood's most powerful figures, she would come to regret it. Ava adjusted the diamond earring dangling from her ear as she took one last look at herself in the mirror. The suite at the Four Seasons was lavish, an opulent display of wealth that had become almost routine in the months leading up to the wedding. The silk of her evening gown clung to her figure, a custom design hand-picked by Catherine Montgomery herself. It was a stunning piece, but she couldn't help but notice how much it resembled the old Hollywood glamour her future mother-in-law adored. Everything had to be curated, controlled, a reflection of the Montgomery legacy. The rehearsal dinner was being held at the Montgomery family estate in Beverly Hills. It wasn't just a gathering of close friends and family. It was an exclusive event, a who's who of Hollywood's elite, from top executives to award-winning directors. The guest list had been carefully crafted to reinforce the image of a power couple. Ava should have been excited. Instead, she felt a heaviness in her chest. Harper, already dressed in a sleek black gown, stood near the window, scrolling through her phone. "You saw the guest list, right?" she asked without looking up. Ava sighed, already knowing where this was going. "Harper, I'm just saying." Harper finally turned to face her. "Why is it that every person coming tonight is either a studio head, a producer, or a politician? I thought this was supposed to be a wedding dinner, not a networking event." Ava knew her best friend was right. This wasn't about celebrating love. It was about optics. Harper walked closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I get that William is a big deal. And yeah, you'll be part of the Hollywood dynasty. But doesn't it bother you that your family and friends are, 10% of the guest list?" Ava didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned back to the mirror and forced a smile. "It's just one night," she said, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince Harper or herself. Harper's expression didn't change, but she let the conversation drop. They left the hotel in one of the sleek black cars arranged by the Montgomerys. The ride to the estate was quiet, Ava watching the city lights blur past the window. She wanted to believe that Harper was overreacting, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Montgomery estate was a fortress of wealth and prestige, a sprawling mansion with marble floors, grand chandeliers, and walls lined with priceless art. The moment Ava stepped inside, she felt the weight of 100 scrutinizing eyes. The air was thick with power, people who had built careers off silent deals and unspoken alliances. Catherine was the first to greet her, elegantly draped in an emerald green gown, her diamond bracelet catching the light as she reached out to take Ava's hands. "Darling, you look exquisite," Catherine said, though there was something unreadable in her expression. "Thank you," Ava replied, forcing herself to smile. Gregory Montgomery was nearby, engaged in a deep conversation with a senator, but he gave her a nod of approval as she passed. This was her introduction into their world, the final test before she was fully absorbed into the Montgomery name. She spotted William near the bar, already deep in conversation with a famous director. He had always been charming, effortlessly weaving through rooms like he belonged there, because he did. His father had molded him for this life. But the moment he saw her, something in his eyes darkened. She had seen that look before. He made his way toward her, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "You're late," he murmured, leaning in close so only she could hear. She blinked, caught off guard by his tone. It was only a few minutes. His fingers pressed against her waist a little too firm. "You know how important tonight is." Ava inhaled sharply but didn't react. Instead, she plastered on a perfect smile. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Shall we mingle?" William hesitated for a second before relaxing his grip. To anyone watching, it would have looked like a simple exchange between an engaged couple. But Ava felt the warning. The dinner was as extravagant as expected. Course after course of gourmet dishes, endless champagne, and conversation laced with polite deception. As Ava sat beside William, listening to yet another executive drone on about their latest project, She noticed Harper at the other end of the table, watching her carefully. Her best friend had been keeping her distance, but her concern was clear. Then came the moment that changed everything. One of the older producers, a longtime friend of the Montgomerys, leaned in with a smirk. "So, Ava," he said, swirling his wine, "are you nervous about tomorrow?" Ava smiled politely. "Excited, mostly." He chuckled. "Well, you know what they say. Hollywood marriages are about as long-lasting as a box office flop." The men around the table laughed. Ava felt her jaw tighten. Harper, seated nearby, cleared her throat. "I think we can all agree Ava and William aren't your typical Hollywood couple." "Oh, of course," the producer said, still smirking. "It's just that, well, let's be honest, this is a bit of a PR dream, isn't it?" The laughter died down slightly. The room tensed. Ava raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I mean, look at the optics," the man continued as if it were the most casual thing in the world. "A Montgomery marrying a brilliant black woman. It's the perfect image for the industry right now. The diversity push, the new era of Hollywood." Ava's stomach twisted. She expected William to say something to shut it down, but he only smirked, sipping his drink. Something inside her cracked. "So, let me get this straight," Ava said, her voice calm but icy. "You think my relationship is some kind of marketing strategy?" The man shrugged. "It doesn't hurt, does it?" Before she could respond, William's hand clamped around her arm under the table. Hard. Her breath hitched. She turned to look at him, and his expression was carefully blank. "We don't need to turn this into a debate," he murmured. "Let's just enjoy the night." Ava stared at him. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't angry at the comment. He was angry at her for responding. A pit formed in her stomach. Harper stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she muttered, throwing her napkin onto the table. Ava followed her lead, standing as well. "I think I need some air." As soon as they stepped onto the balcony, Harper turned to her. "Tell me you saw that. Tell me you saw him." Ava exhaled shakily. "I saw it." "And?" Ava didn't answer right away, because for the first time she wasn't sure what to say. Inside, William continued laughing with the others as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just squeezed her arm so tightly it left a mark, as if he hadn't just let that conversation happen. And Ava realized something chilling. She had spent months ignoring the warnings, convincing herself that William was different from his family. But now, standing outside that grand dining hall, she wasn't so sure anymore. Ava awoke the next morning with a dull ache in her arm, a bruise forming just beneath the surface of her skin where William had gripped her the night before. The previous evening's events played on a loop in her mind. The producer's condescending smirk, the laughter of the guests, the weight of William's hand pressing into her arm like a silent warning. The pit in her stomach hadn't gone away. She sat up in bed, wrapping her arms around herself. Outside her suite at the Four Seasons, Los Angeles shimmered under the morning light, the city already pulsing with activity. It was supposed to be her wedding day. A knock at the door startled her. Harper stepped inside, still in her silk robe, a coffee cup in hand. One look at Ava's face and her expression darkened. "You barely slept." Ava shook her head. "I couldn't." Harper sat beside her on the bed, setting the coffee down. "Ava, we need to talk about what happened last night." Ava exhaled. "I know." Harper reached for her arm, gently rolling up the sleeve of her nightgown. The faint outline of William's fingers was beginning to darken into a bruise. Harper swore under her breath. "This isn't okay," she said firmly. Ava swallowed. "I know," she admitted, "but if I leave now—" Harper's expression hardened. "They'll bury you," Ava didn't need to ask who they were. The Montgomerys weren't just a Hollywood dynasty. They were a brand, a corporation, a legacy. They had the money, the connections, and the influence to erase anything that threatened them. If she walked away now, they would make sure she was the one left ruined, not William. Ava ran a hand through her hair. They'll spin it. Say I got cold feet, that I was the problem. They won't just spin it, Harper corrected. They'll destroy you. Ava shuddered. As if summoned by thought alone, another knock sounded at the door. Ava and Harper exchanged a glance before Ava stood and hesitantly opened it. Catherine Montgomery stood there, perfectly composed, wearing an ivory dress that screamed elegance. In her hand, she held a slim leather folder. "Good morning, darling," Catherine said smoothly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Harper straightened, crossing her arms, but Catherine barely acknowledged her. "I wanted to speak with you privately before the ceremony," Catherine continued, placing the folder down on the desk near the window. "There are just a few final things to go over." Ava stared at her. "Final things?" Catherine gave a tight smile. "Legalities." Ava's stomach turned as she glanced at the folder. She already knew what this was. "The prenup," Catherine confirmed. "Just a few last-minute adjustments." Harper scoffed. "Last-minute adjustments? On the morning of the wedding?" Catherine ignored her. Gregory's attorneys added a few additional clauses regarding asset protection, she said delicately. Nothing out of the ordinary. Ava knew better. Everything about this was calculated. The Montgomerys had spent years crafting airtight contracts that protected their fortune, ensuring that no one, not a wife, not a business partner, not even their own family, could ever take what was theirs. Ava hesitated before opening the folder. The pages inside were dense with legal jargon, but a few lines stood out immediately. If she divorced William, she would receive nothing. No alimony, no property rights, no stake in any shared assets. If she spoke publicly about their marriage, she would be financially liable for defamation. If she attempted to press charges against him for any form of abuse, she would be bound by mandatory arbitration, controlled by Montgomery-appointed mediators. Ava's blood ran cold. This wasn't a prenup. It was a cage. She set the papers down carefully. "This is different from what I originally agreed to." Catherine tilted her head, her smile never wavering. "It's simply a formality, darling." Ava looked her future mother-in-law in the eye. "And what happens if I don't sign it?" For the first time, Catherine's mask cracked, just for a second. Then she sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "Ava, we both know that wouldn't be in your best interest." Harper took a step forward. "Are you threatening her?" Catherine exhaled, looking amused. "Of course not." But they all knew the truth. If Ava refused to sign, they would destroy her. The Montgomerys would use their power to blacklist her, to smear her name in the press, to make sure she was seen as difficult and unstable. The media would side with them. Hollywood would close its doors. Ava thought about the producers who had laughed last night, the way they had spoken about her relationship as if it were a marketing strategy. She thought about how silent William had been. Her hands curled into fists. She forced herself to take a deep breath before looking Catherine in the eye. "I need time to read this carefully." Catherine's expression flickered with irritation. "Of course. But the ceremony is in a few hours, so don't take too long." She turned gracefully, exiting the suite with the same polished elegance she had entered with. The moment the door closed, Harper exploded. "Are you kidding me? Ava, this isn't just a bad contract, this is a goddamn trap. Ava rubbed her temples. I know. So, what are you going to do? Ava inhaled shakily. She had two choices. She could sign the prenup, go through with the wedding, and become Mrs. William Montgomery, a perfect, obedient wife with no escape. Or she could leave. Walk away from the wedding, from the Montgomery name, from the life she had been preparing for. But if she did that, she wouldn't just be walking away from William. She would be walking into a war. Harper's voice softened. Ava, you can't do this. Ava turned toward the window, staring out at the city below. The Montgomerys wanted to break her before she even walked down the aisle. But they had underestimated one thing. Ava Harris had never been the kind of woman to be owned. And if they thought she was going to stay quiet, they had no idea what was coming. Ava stood at the window of her suite, her fingers gripping the silk curtain as she watched the city move below her. The prenup sat untouched on the desk behind her, its presence as suffocating as the walls closing in around her. Harper paced across the room, the anger in her movements barely contained. You're not seriously thinking about signing that, are you? Harper finally said, stopping abruptly. Ava exhaled, her eyes still fixed on the skyline. If I don't, they'll destroy me. Harper scoffed. Ava, they're already trying to destroy you. That contract is proof. She wasn't wrong. The Montgomerys had spent years perfecting the art of control. Every clause in that prenup had been designed to trap Ava, to keep her silent, to ensure that no matter what happened in her marriage, she could never fight back. Ava turned to face her best friend. If I walk away now, I need a plan. I can't just leave and let them paint me as some unstable woman who couldn't handle the pressure. Harper folded her arms. So, what do we do? Ava's mind was already racing. William's outburst at the rehearsal dinner, the laughter of the guests, the producer's words. This is a PR dream. This had never been about love. It had always been about image. The Montgomerys had found a way to use her, to elevate their reputation under the guise of progressiveness. And now they wanted to ensure she never had the power to change the narrative. But what if she did? Ava's heart pounded as the idea took shape. We find out everything, she said. Every dirty secret they don't want the world to know. Harper's eyes widened. You want to take them down? Ava nodded slowly. If they want to bury me, they need to understand. I bury back. Harper was already making calls before they left the hotel. She had contacts, journalists, publicists, private investigators who knew the ins and outs of Hollywood's darkest corners. Ava knew that if she was going to do this, she had to start at the source. The first person she reached out to was Jason Langley, an independent film producer known for his exposés on Hollywood corruption. He had spent years documenting how power structures within the industry protected abusers, how executives and producers manipulated contracts, buried scandals, and ruined careers. Jason answered on the second ring. Ava Harris, he said, his voice carrying the weight of curiosity. Didn't think I'd hear from you. Ava glanced at Harper before speaking. I need your help. There was a pause, then, meet me at L'Hermitage in an hour. Jason was already waiting when Ava and Harper arrived at the hotel's private lounge. He was younger than most producers in the industry, but what he lacked in decades of experience, he made up for in sheer tenacity. His documentaries had led to lawsuits, resignations, even a few arrests. He leaned forward as Ava slid into the booth across from him. I take it this has something to do with your fiancé? Ava met his gaze. And his family. Jason smirked. I had a feeling something about that marriage didn't add up. The Montgomerys are very good at making people disappear." Ava stiffened. "Disappear?" He nodded. "Not in the literal sense, but careers, reputations, businesses. If you cross them, you might as well be erased from Hollywood." Ava already knew this, but hearing it out loud made it feel real. Harper cut in. "We need information, everything you know about them, and we need it fast." Jason tapped his fingers on the table, considering. "That depends. Are you looking for dirt on William, or the whole empire?" Ava didn't hesitate. "Both." Jason let out a low whistle. "That's a dangerous game." "I don't care," Ava said. Jason studied her for a long moment before nodding. "All right, let's start with William." The deeper Ava dug, the uglier the truth became. Jason had sources. Former assistants, ex-girlfriends, industry insiders who had seen the Montgomerys operate up close. The pattern was clear. William had a history of violence. Several of his exes had experienced the same temper Ava had seen in him, but they had been silenced through NDA agreements, hush money, or sheer fear. One of them, Lily Carter, had been an aspiring actress when she dated him. When she tried to speak out, her career mysteriously crumbled. "She was blacklisted," Jason explained. "Nobody would cast her. Nobody would hire her." Overnight, she went from being a rising star to completely invisible. Ava's stomach churned. And then there was Gregory Montgomery. Jason's research into the patriarch of the family revealed a web of financial crimes, cover-ups, and harassment allegations stretching back decades. His production company had a history of exploiting black talent, offering roles that were either degrading stereotypes or positioning white actors as the heroes of the narrative. More disturbingly, several young actresses had accused him of coercion, though none of the cases had ever gone public. "They make problems disappear," Jason said grimly, "just like they're trying to do with you." Ava exhaled, staring down at the files spread across the table. She had spent so long trying to convince herself that William was different, that his family's legacy didn't define him. She had been wrong. Harper leaned in. "So, what's the plan?" Ava met her best friend's eyes. "We make sure the world sees everything." Because if the Montgomerys thought they could silence her, they were about to learn. Ava Harris had no intention of going quietly. Ava knew she had little time. The Montgomerys were powerful, connected, and ruthless. If she wanted to take them down, she had to move quickly before they realized what she was planning, before they could silence her like they had silenced so many others. Back at the Four Seasons, she sat on the couch with Harper, reviewing everything Jason had uncovered. The files, the testimonies, the financial reports. It was a damning collection of evidence, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Jason had warned her that while he had the framework of the story, she would need something bigger, something undeniable, to break through the Montgomerys' wall of influence. Ava pressed her fingers to her temples. "We need more." Harper frowned. "More?" She gestured to the stacks of documents spread across the coffee table. "Ava, this is already enough to ruin them." "Legally? Maybe," Ava admitted. "But in Hollywood, they'll spin it. They'll say these are just bitter exes, people with an agenda. The media will protect them if we don't have something irrefutable." Harper sighed. "So, what do you suggest?" Ava's mind raced. "We need someone on the inside, someone who worked for them." Harper pursed her lips, then reached for her phone. "I might know someone." 30 minutes later, Harper's contact agreed to meet. The woman's name was Elena Rodriguez, a former executive assistant at Montgomery Pictures. She had worked directly under Gregory Montgomery for nearly 5 years before quitting suddenly. Ava and Harper met her at an out-of-the-way cafe in West Hollywood, a place discreet enough that prying eyes wouldn't recognize them. Elena arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and a hooded sweatshirt, her posture tense as she slid into the booth across from them. She didn't order anything. "I don't know why I agreed to this," she muttered, glancing around. "If anyone finds out I'm talking to you—" "They won't," Ava reassured her. "We just need the truth." Elena let out a bitter laugh. "The truth? The truth is, I wasted 5 years of my life protecting a monster." Ava and Harper exchanged a glance. Elena leaned in. "I assume you already know about the NDAs, the settlements." Ava nodded. "We do, but we need something concrete, something that can't be dismissed." Elena hesitated. Then, after a long pause, she took a deep breath. "There's a hard drive," she said finally. "Gregory kept everything: emails, videos, financial records. He thought he was untouchable. He had backups stored in a private office at the studio." Ava's heart pounded. This was it. "Where?" she asked. Elena exhaled. "It's not somewhere you can just walk into. It's in his executive suite, locked behind a biometric security system. Only a few people have access." Ava clenched her fist. "Including William?" Elena hesitated before nodding. "Yes, William has clearance." Ava sat back, her mind already spinning. If she could get inside that office, she could end this. Later that night, back in her hotel suite, Ava stood at the window, staring out at the glittering skyline of Los Angeles. She knew what she had to do. She would get the hard drive. She would expose the Montgomerys. And when it was over, they would never silence another woman again. Ava felt the walls closing in around her. Every move she made, every conversation she had, she could sense the invisible presence of the Montgomerys watching. She knew it was only a matter of time before they caught wind of what she was planning. That time came sooner than expected. The morning after meeting Elena, Ava received an unmarked envelope slipped under the door of her hotel suite. Harper, who had been staying with her for safety, was the first to see it. "Ava." Her voice was sharp as she bent down and picked it up. "You need to see this." Ava took the envelope, already feeling a cold weight settle in her stomach. She tore it open, pulling out a single sheet of paper. Inside was a printed-out email, an internal memo from a medical board discussing an upcoming investigation into Harris Aesthetics, Ava's clinic, an investigation that had not existed yesterday. Harper swore under her breath. "They're coming for your career." Ava swallowed hard. "I knew they would." "This is just the start," Harper muttered, pacing. "They're going to keep applying pressure until you fold." Ava wasn't so sure. The Montgomerys were making moves, but they weren't public. They weren't addressing her directly. That meant they still thought they could intimidate her into silence. That meant she still had power. Her phone buzzed. A message. "William, we need to talk. Meet me for lunch." Ava stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She hesitated for a long moment before typing a response. "Ava, fine, noon, Bel Air Hotel." Harper frowned. "You're meeting him? I need to know what he knows." The Bel Air Hotel was one of those places where celebrities came to escape. Tucked away behind lush greenery, it was private, exclusive, perfect for conversations no one else was supposed to hear. When Ava arrived, William was already waiting at a corner table on the patio. He was wearing an expensive suit, his expression unreadable as she approached. "Ava," he said smoothly as she took her seat, "you look beautiful." She didn't respond. He sighed, setting his glass down. "I know you're upset." Ava raised an eyebrow. "You hit me, William." in a room full of people. His jaw tightened. It was a mistake. She let out a short, humorless laugh. A mistake? He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, the expectations. My father. Don't, she cut in. Don't make this about him. You had a choice. His nostrils flared, but he forced a smile. Ava, you need to stop whatever it is you're doing. She tilted her head. And what exactly am I doing? William exhaled through his nose. Don't play games with me. You think I don't know about Jason Langley? About Elena? Ava's stomach flipped, but she kept her expression neutral. You're making a mistake, William continued. This doesn't end well for you. She folded her hands on the table. For me? He nodded. My family? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. We don't lose. If you keep pushing, they will make sure you regret it. There it was, the threat. Ava leaned in, lowering her voice to match his. Your family might not lose, William, but you do. His expression flickered. Because, here's the thing, she continued. Your father? He's untouchable, sure, but you're different. You're reckless, sloppy. You don't have his control, his patience. You make mistakes. She saw it in his eyes then. Realization. Ava wasn't scared of him anymore. For the first time, he was the one feeling cornered. William sat back, his jaw tightening. You're making a big mistake, Ava. She picked up her purse, standing. So are you. Then she walked away, leaving him sitting there, gripping his glass so tightly his knuckles turned white. That night, the threats escalated. When Ava and Harper returned to the hotel, there was another envelope waiting. This time, inside was a single photograph. It was of Harper, taken earlier that day, outside a coffee shop. She was completely unaware, mid-conversation with someone, but the message was clear. Harper paled. Ava? Ava clenched her fists. They're trying to scare us. Harper looked at her, eyes wide. It's working. Ava took a breath. We have to move faster. The Montgomerys thought they could control the narrative. They were wrong, because now Ava wasn't just playing defense. She was going to take them down before they even saw it coming. Ava had always known the Montgomerys were ruthless. But the threats, the intimidation tactics, the sudden investigation into her clinic, it all confirmed what she had feared. They weren't just trying to silence her. They wanted to destroy her. But she had spent too many years building herself up to let them tear her down. It was time to fight back. Jason's team had been working around the clock, piecing together every bit of evidence, every hidden truth they had uncovered about the Montgomerys. The film wasn't just about William or his abuse. It was bigger than that. It was about a dynasty built on lies, manipulation, and the systemic suppression of anyone who dared to challenge them. And now, it was ready. Ava sat in a dimly lit office at Jason's production company, watching the final cut on a large monitor. The documentary, titled Hollywood Privilege, was an unflinching expose. It opened with a montage of the Montgomerys' biggest successes, award-winning films, red carpet appearances, Gregory Montgomery shaking hands with powerful politicians. Then the unraveling began. William's history of violence, backed by testimonies from multiple women. Gregory's shady financial dealings, exposed through leaked documents and former employees speaking out. Catherine's behind-the-scenes control, manipulating young actresses and executives into silence. And then, the moment that would shatter everything, the rehearsal dinner footage. Jason had managed to obtain a recording from one of the waitstaff, a shaky but clear video showing William striking Ava in front of a room full of Hollywood elites. The audio captured the stunned silence, the way people looked away, the quiet complicity of the industry. It was damning. It was undeniable. And in just a few hours, the world would see it. Jason turned to Ava. "Are you sure about this?" She met his gaze. "I've never been more sure of anything." The film went live at midnight. Jason's team had orchestrated a multi-platform release. It was uploaded to every major streaming site, sent to journalists, leaked to social media. Within minutes, it was spreading like wildfire. By 3 a.m., #Hollywood Privilege was trending worldwide. By 6 a.m., the first statements from the Montgomerys' PR team were released. Vague, dismissive, carefully crafted damage control. By noon, the cracks were showing. Major news outlets picked up the story, playing clips from the film in every headline. The footage of William hitting Ava played on a loop, a visual testament to the kind of power Hollywood had protected for so long. Then the dominoes began to fall. A-list celebrities who had once aligned themselves with the Montgomerys began distancing themselves. Major studios announced they were reevaluating their partnerships with Montgomery Pictures. Ava sat in Harper's apartment, watching the coverage unfold. Messages flooded her phone. Support from people she hadn't heard from in years, reporters asking for interviews, lawyers offering representation. But the biggest blow came in the afternoon. The Montgomerys had always controlled the media, but now the media was turning on them. A bombshell report from a major news network confirmed what Ava and Jason had exposed. Multiple women had come forward against William, and the LAPD had opened an investigation. Gregory Montgomery, once seen as untouchable, was now under federal scrutiny for financial fraud. And Catherine? She had gone silent. No carefully worded PR statement, no damage control, just silence. It was over. Ava exhaled, setting her phone down. Harper sat beside her, shaking her head in disbelief. "You did it." Ava leaned back against the couch, exhaustion settling in. "We did it." But she knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The Montgomerys would fight back. They would try to rebuild, to reclaim their power. But for the first time in decades, they weren't the ones controlling the narrative. And Ava would make sure they never did again. Ava woke to the sound of her phone vibrating relentlessly on the bedside table. It was still dark outside, but the city of Los Angeles never slept, and neither did the fallout from Hollywood Privilege. She blinked against the dim glow of the screen, seeing dozens of missed calls and unread messages. Harper stirred beside her on the couch, rubbing her eyes. More reporters? Ava exhaled, scrolling through the messages. Not just reporters. Lawyers, industry executives, people I haven't spoken to in years. She held up the phone, showing Harper the notifications. "It's happening. They're crumbling." Harper sat up. "Let's turn on the news." They switched on the television just in time to catch the morning broadcast. The footage rolling across the screen was surreal. Gregory Montgomery, Hollywood legend, caught entering a federal building, flanked by his attorneys. Catherine Montgomery, emerging from their Beverly Hills estate, her usual poised demeanor replaced with tight-lipped fury as reporters shouted questions. William Montgomery, nowhere to be seen. The anchors were relentless. The once powerful Montgomery family faces an unprecedented scandal, with allegations ranging from financial fraud to domestic abuse. William Montgomery, heir to the dynasty, is now under criminal investigation following the release of damning footage in the viral documentary Hollywood Privilege. Ava felt a strange, eerie calm settle over her. She had spent so long fearing their power, dreading what they might do to her if she spoke out. But now, for the first time, she wasn't the one on the defensive. The Montgomerys were. Harper grinned. "Do you realize what you've done?" Ava nodded. "Yeah." She took a breath. "But it's not over yet." By midday, the legal floodgates had burst open. William Montgomery's attorneys released a statement, calling the video of the slap at the rehearsal dinner a moment of emotional distress, and accusing Ava of trying to capitalize on private matters for personal gain. Ava laughed bitterly when she saw the statement. So predictable. But the damage control wasn't working. By afternoon, at least 5 women had come forward with allegations against William. 2 of them filed police reports. Their statements were eerily similar to Ava's experience. Control, manipulation, abuse hidden behind the golden veneer of Hollywood privilege. Then came the financial bombshell. A leaked internal report from Montgomery Pictures revealed decades of fraudulent financial activity. Jason and his investigative team had uncovered tax evasion schemes, hidden offshore accounts, and illegal contract manipulations that had kept the company afloat. Within hours, the Justice Department announced a formal inquiry into Gregory Montgomery and his studio. Stock in Montgomery Pictures plummeted. Their biggest investors pulled out. By nightfall, Gregory Montgomery stepped down as CEO of his own company. Ava and Harper sat in stunned silence, watching it unfold. Harper let out a breathless laugh. "Ava, you just burned one of the most powerful families in Hollywood to the ground." Ava shook her head. "No, they did this to themselves. I just made sure the world saw it." The biggest blow came the next morning. Federal agents raided Montgomery Pictures headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. Live news footage showed men in suits carrying out boxes of documents, computers, and hard drives. At the same time, an emergency board meeting was called. The Montgomerys had no allies left. The shareholders voted to remove the entire Montgomery family from leadership. It was the end of an era. And then, at noon, came the final breaking news alert. William Montgomery had been arrested. Ava's breath caught in her throat as she saw the live footage. William, dressed in a dark suit, hands cuffed behind his back as he was escorted into an LAPD vehicle. He kept his head down, refusing to acknowledge the screaming reporters. The news anchor's voice rang out. William Montgomery, heir to the Montgomery media empire, has been taken into custody following multiple allegations of domestic abuse and assault. This arrest comes amid the collapse of the Montgomery dynasty, which has dominated Hollywood for decades. Ava covered her mouth, the weight of it all finally hitting her. It was over. Harper sat back, exhaling. "I never thought I'd see the day." Ava nodded slowly. Neither did they. The following week was a blur. The fallout from Hollywood privilege rippled across the industry. Other studios scrambled to distance themselves from the Montgomerys. Celebrities who had once aligned themselves with the family now rushed to issue statements condemning them. Even Catherine Montgomery, always the mastermind behind the scenes, was forced into hiding. For years, she had orchestrated the rise of her family. Now, she was watching their empire crumble in real time. Gregory was indicted on charges of fraud and corruption. William faced multiple felony charges for assault and abuse. Montgomery Pictures, once one of Hollywood's most powerful studios, declared bankruptcy. And Catherine? She vanished from public life. Ava stood on the rooftop of Harper's apartment, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline. It felt different now. For so long, the city had felt suffocating, like a trap waiting to close in on her. But tonight, it felt open, free. She had spent years trying to mold herself into the version of Ava Harris that Hollywood would accept. But now she realized she didn't need their approval. She had taken on the most powerful family in the industry and won. Ava. She turned to see Jason stepping onto the rooftop, holding up a bottle of champagne. Thought we should celebrate. Harper grinned. Damn right we should. Ava took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. They clinked glasses, the city glowing behind them. The Montgomerys had built their empire on silence and fear. But now, Ava had made sure their voices would never be heard again. The sun rose over Los Angeles, casting a golden hue over the skyline. The air was different now, lighter, freer. The Montgomery dynasty had collapsed, their reign of unchecked power and silent cruelty finally over. Their studio was in ruins, their influence shattered, and their carefully constructed illusion of Hollywood royalty had been stripped away for the world to see. But for Ava, the fight wasn't over. She had won the battle, but the war for justice, the war against the system that had enabled them, was just beginning. The first thing Ava did was reclaim her name. In the weeks following the documentary's release and the Montgomerys' downfall, she filed lawsuits against the false claims they had spread about her. With the evidence on her side, the cases were swiftly ruled in her favor. Their attempts to paint her as an unstable ex, a woman scorned, fell apart in the face of the truth. More importantly, she ensured that other women didn't have to fight alone. With the help of Harper and Jason, Ava launched the Harris Foundation for Justice, an organization dedicated to supporting victims of abuse in elite industries, women who, like her, had been silenced by power, money, and connections. The foundation provided legal resources, therapy, and protection for those brave enough to speak out. And people did speak out. Inspired by Ava's fight, more victims of Hollywood's elite came forward. Directors, producers, actors, those who had operated with impunity for decades, were suddenly facing public scrutiny like never before. For the first time, there were real consequences. Hollywood wasn't just watching history unfold. It was changing. Meanwhile, the final nail in the Montgomerys' coffin came from an unexpected place. James Thompson, the CEO of Thompson Global, the very man the Montgomerys had tried to manipulate through a fraudulent merger, had taken a keen interest in their downfall. When their empire collapsed, he swooped in and acquired what remained of Montgomery Pictures. Not to save it, to dismantle it. Within weeks, Montgomery Pictures ceased to exist. The studio, once a titan of the industry, was dissolved, its assets liquidated, its name erased from the Hollywood landscape. And with it, the last remnants of the family's power crumbled into dust. Ava stood outside the former Montgomery studio lot, watching as workers took down the gold-plated Montgomery sign from the building's entrance. It was surreal. Harper stood beside her. "You did it," she murmured. Ava exhaled. "We did it." She had walked away from the Montgomerys with nothing but the truth. Now she was walking away with something much greater. Her freedom, her power, and the knowledge that she had changed Hollywood forever. 6 months later, Ava sat in her office, her new office, not at a clinic, not in a hospital, but at the Harris Foundation's headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. The building had once been a property owned by Montgomery Pictures, but after their collapse, it had been repurposed as a safe space for survivors. Ava leaned back in her chair, looking at the city through the glass windows. The past year had taken everything from her, her career, her reputation, her safety, but in return, she had built something greater than she ever imagined. Harper stepped inside, holding up a bottle of wine. Guess who just made the Forbes 40 Under 40 list? She grinned. Ava raised an eyebrow. Me? Damn right you did. Ava laughed softly. She never needed Hollywood's approval, but seeing her name, not as William Montgomery's fiancée, not as the woman who took down a dynasty, but as a force for real change, it felt right. Harper poured 2 glasses and raised hers. To Ava Harris, she said, the woman who burned an empire to the ground and built something better in its place. Ava clinked her glass against Harper's, smiling. To never being silenced again. The city stretched before her, no longer a cage. It was a blank slate. Ava Harris was free, and she had only just begun. If you found this story compelling, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more powerful stories like this. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story resonated with you, share it with others who need to hear it. Keep watching. There's another incredible story waiting for you right now. Click on the next video, and we'll see you there.